We're very pleased to have with us today Jonathan Hadaway, Jeffrey Branton, and Jonathan Smith from Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine's IT team. And they're here today to share with all of us their journey to VDI. So a couple quick logistics before we get started. We encourage the audience to ask as many questions of Jonathan and the team as you'd like. We'll interject those live, and we'll also save some time at the end to go through more Q&A. There are a lot of questions that were filled out by registrants as you all registered for the webinar in the survey, and the team has those, and they'll try to touch on some of those as they go through, and we'll also ask some of those as well live as we go through the webinar. And then the last thing is this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to reference it later, or if you want to share it with more members on your team, we'll be sending out the link probably within a few days after this has been wrapped up. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Jonathan Hadaway to start the presentation.
Thanks, Tom. Just to go over a little bit about our facility, we're the first osteopathic medical college in the state of Alabama. We're located in Dothan, Alabama, which is in the southeast corner in the Panhandle region. We had our first inaugural class started last August, and they're finishing up their third semester right now, so they'll be going into the field starting after their fourth semester, which will be in the fall of 2015. So during that time, that's when we feel like there'll be a need for remote access, and we'll kind of talk about that later on why we chose what we have in place for that. We're also affiliated with Southeast Alabama Medical Center. That's a 420-bed regional medical center located in Dothan as well. We feel we have a smaller IT team than most places, but we got 2 infrastructure guys, 2 applications, 2 support, and 1 management. As starting out as a new college, we had the opportunity to do whatever we felt like was the best choice when it came to publishing desktops for faculty and staff and also students. So I had a little bit of VDI experience in the past without Unidesk, so we'll kind of talk about how we started out and then how we went to using Unidesk to help us manage our VDI infrastructure. VDI offers several advantages over going with traditional PCs, more mobile, collaborative computing experience for the end users, a higher standard of learning, and a greater efficiency for IT, being that we go from less of a break-fix shop to just making sure our infrastructure is in place. And they give us a great edge on attracting students and faculty, being that bring your own device. Doesn't matter what you have, as long as you have the Citrix receiver installed, you should be able to get to your desktop.
Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
One question that we got on the survey form was about building the business case for VDI, and we see that with a lot of other customers that trying to convince management of the move to VDI is always one of the early obstacles they have to overcome. Your case was a bit unique in that you were starting fresh with no infrastructure. Was there any process involved for you to sell VDI versus buying physical PCs, or was it kind of easier because you were starting with nothing?
We did, before we actually moved into this building, we did have some just regular traditional PCs, just because it wasn't time to build the infrastructure in the main building. So we actually went from maybe 25 PCs over to the thin client infrastructure, or the zero client infrastructure. Selling that, it came down to we're a small shop and we need to be able to support as quick as possible and meet the needs of the students and the faculty. So we come up with, you always hear that VDI costs a lot of money. Well, I guess people that's already spent so much money going into traditional desktops, I feel like they probably feel that way more than someone like we were, where we didn't have to worry about that as a case. So I think pitching it with a fresh start was a lot easier than probably the users that don't have that opportunity like we did. But pitching it was the manageability of it which that's kind of where we had a couple of issues, and when we first started out, we did not start out with Unidesk. So we're going to talk about how we went from just VDI without Unidesk to VDI with Unidesk. So some big objective that we had with going with VDI without Unidesk was a single image management. We were using XenApp streaming our applications, and we had issues with that. The end users would complain about issues with connectivity going into the receiver from their desktop. So we would have to make custom images, and we ended up with like 5 different gold images. So that started taking up space big time on our SAN side. So just after having to deal with that and having to do updates across like 5 different images, that really started getting out of hand. So we're looking for something with a single image management, which Unidesk has. And the ease of management of our applications has tremendously increased without having to worry about the streaming part. Unidesk layering technology just blends it in, and everybody just thinks they're running an application that's right there on the traditional C drive. And then like say if we have faculty and staff that they need a special software, having to go out to their computer or remote into their computer to install that and worry about, is this version going to work? With having the layering technology, we're able to test that in our environment before pushing it out to anybody. So it's kind of like you have a virtual library of applications, and then you can just push them out as need be as the users request that. Access anywhere, anytime, on any device, that's been tremendous for us. We did start out using the Cisco ASA for our external connections in, and we had a lot of complaints on performance. So something else that was part of our change when we went with Unidesk was also implementing the Citrix NetScalers, and we've had nothing but praise from the faculty and students on how that has improved since we've switched that over. And bring your own device, which is kind of what we're talking about there. We have a few faculty that have iPads, and they walk around with their Bluetooth keyboards and their iPads, and they use their virtual desktop from there. Our actual lead librarian, she actually uses her desktop on her iPad exclusively. She doesn't even use her computer or her thin client at her desk. So she works from the house a lot, and she really has gave us great feedback after moving over to Unidesk. Just a little bit about our physical infrastructure. We started out with a Dell shop, and we continue to go that way. When we first started out with VDI, we selected the Dell blade chassis. I think that's the M1000E. Something that really sold us on the Dell blades was the EqualLogic storage that was built into it. That was really cool to us. And this solution that Dell helped us come up with is what they sell VDI with, is this the power of that EqualLogic with these M620 blade servers. So that's what we started out with. Then we moved and added the Citrix NetScaler, and then you can see those in the picture below. And the rest of those are all EqualLogics there at the bottom. That's our entire infrastructure. So at the top, if you notice, we've got the 6 blades across the top. That's our VDI host servers. And then the 3 located on the bottom right, that's our VMware infrastructure where our production servers run. And then the SANs there in that second picture on the bottom, that's what you see there. We just have different tiers of storage. So for our fast high IOP needs, we use the Blade EqualLogic. It has a mixture of SSDs and 10K drives in a RAID 6 accelerated format. And then we also use part of our EqualLogic for some of the slower, our 7200 RPM drives. And anywhere in the college you go, you'll see a Dell Y0 client with 2 dual 22-inch screens. That's a standard setup for a user here.
So Jonathan, we have a question from Patricia. She asks, how large is your network?
I guess maybe like endpoint-wise?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of general, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe she can expound on that, but yeah.
Well, okay, so our backbone is Cisco. We use the Nexus 5Ks, and our layer 3 routing takes place in the data center on the pair of 5Ks, and then we have some of the 2Ks off of that, and we also have across multiple floors. We have the 3750 X series. So we have 10 gig backbone to each floor with 1 gig to the desktop. And endpoints, if we're looking at like the WISE endpoints, I would say about probably 100 to 125 endpoints across the college. And looking at the actual virtual desktops, we've just pushed over 400 here recently. So some of those are not ran. Those could be ran on the actual students' devices. We have a big wireless infrastructure just because the students are not allowed to plug in. They have to use wireless here to access their information. So we have them set up with their own wireless SSID for being able to get into resources and get into their virtual desktop.
Okay, a couple more questions. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, and then we probably run about 40 to 50 servers just on our VM servers.
Okay, Raymond asks, did he hear you correctly that you said the drives are 7.2K?
The ones on, so we have the Blade EqualLogic runs SSD and 10K drives, which is where the high ops are. So part of our desktops run across that array, and then the lower requirements that Unidesk, has for the lower speeds, they do run on the 7200 RPM. It's inline SAS is what it is.
Okay, and Patricia clarified, she said they've got 7 computer labs, approximately 500 computers. She was asking just to see how traffic flows with VDI.
It flows fine. I mean, we don't have any no complaints from the faculty and staff when it comes to, I guess maybe she's like latency or something, but really we don't have any complaints about that.
Yep, she said yes. Latency was the real question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Latency is we don't have latency when it comes to that.
Okay, great. Thank you, audience, for all the questions. Keep them coming.
Okay. This will probably be a recap here a little bit, but so we currently have a little over 400 desktops, and by the end of the 4th year, we're looking at having just over 700. We accept around 150 students a year here, so we have our second class which has started. So right now we're running about 325 on student desktops, and we have some lab. We have about 12 lab virtual desktops set up for our performance exam area, and then the rest of that being it could be mostly faculty and staff, but there are some other little special desktops we would create for people. So the way that it works with osteopathic medicine is the students, as they come in, the 1st and 2nd year, they're on site, and then 3rd and 4th year, they go in to do their clinical rotations. Thanks, Jeff. So during that time, they're going to be out in the field all across Alabama, some in Georgia, some in Florida. So that's why the push for VDI was big for us. So if there's something that a faculty member needs those students to have or have installed to use, we don't have to worry about, sending an email out to these students. You guys need to go here, download the software. You need to configure it like this. We take that away from the end user, and we take care of that. So we can customize that application the way we want it to be. If we need to go in and make changes in the registry, Unidesk has a great knowledge log for other people that have done certain applications. So I highly suggest if you have questions about certain applications that we may not cover today, that you go check that out, and you can learn what other people have done to make it work best in the Unidesk environment. So right now we currently have 6 host servers. We usually see about 100 desktops of servers what we run on the M620s. So every year we've just been adding a couple more, so we just make sure we have a couple of hot spares there in place. And then the Dell EqualLogic, that's the blade array, the M4110XS. And the desktop. So the faculty, when we first started out our VDI journey, we were only doing 10 gig desktops. And that, with faculty, we quickly seen that these guys needed more space. So we went with 20 gigs per desktop for the faculty, and we're only doing 5 gigs for the student desktops. The students usually don't save a lot to their desktops. They'll get on and use applications, and they may save some downloads and print them out, but it's usually not a lot being actually saved to the student desktops. And then the Citrix NetScalers, we have a couple of those in HA mode. And then the one gold image OS layer, which is that's what we love. And something that we're really excited about coming up this year is we're going to start testing out the NVIDIA Grid virtual GPU host. Dell's helped us pick out the host for that. So we should be getting that this January. And the reason we're going to go for that is we're looking at upgrading our faculty and staff to more beefier systems, just because, like say, some of our anatomy people may have 3D views of the anatomy of the body, and they have slides that they look at that are very high detail, that they zoom in on and can twist around in all kind of ways. And then just watching videos, just things like that very high definition experience that I think that they're looking for. So that's what we're looking at doing in January.
Okay, Jonathan, we got a number of questions. I think you touched on the first one from Michael. He's asking about video graphics performance, and it sounds like, and I know you talked to me before about how video is a real big part of education at the college, and that's why you're adding the NVIDIA Grid cards.
Yes.
Okay, Srinivas is asking, what number of concurrent sessions are you seeing, and what's your bandwidth utilization at peak usage?
I would not be able to answer that question on the bandwidth. Concurrent uses, I would say at peak probably like say when a class gets out, like maybe they get out of session and they're going in to do something like a project after class is over. Probably the most we'd see at a time right now would be around like 150 to 175, plus the faculty and staff if they're on at that time. So that just say half of that. So probably about 225 at a time would be the max that we're running.
Okay. You're welcome, Srinivas. You just said thank you. Raymond's asking, are students able to access their desktops remotely? And I know that was a big reason why you went to VDI, especially because I think you said your third and fourth year students are in the field and not in the classroom. So certainly remote access is a huge part of it for not only students but faculty and staff, right?
Yes, sir. It's very huge for us. A lot of faculty and staff, they don't want to be up here working till 10 o'clock at night. They'd rather just be sitting in their bed or something at home. So they're able to go home and work on the same thing they've seen when they worked here. They just pull up that same desktop and get that same, the same feel like they're sitting there at their desk. And students are the same way. They also have the availability to go to their desktop from anywhere. It's just, I guess, the way the future is going with education is, distance learning and, everything being digital. I mean, being able to get to your resources whenever you want to, especially in medical. The students, you never know when they're going to study. They may be studying at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. You just don't know. So they may not have access to certain parts of the building during those times. So if they can get to their desktop, at least they can get to all their resources when it comes to the digital side of things.
Okay, and Troy just asked, what problems did Unidesk solve for you? What couldn't you do that you can do with Unidesk? And I think you're about to go into that now.
Yes, we'll talk about that right now. Was that the last one? You want us to continue on?
Yeah, that's a good segue into, that's the last one for now.
Okay. All right, so I have kind of talked about this a little bit. We'll just recap it. We was talking about rolling out multiple OS images, that just having to manage multiple OSs. it may not sound like a lot, but it does. It becomes a big headache. It's a lot easier to carve out and just manage the actual applications the way Unidesk does its layering technology. The layering technology is what sold us on Unidesk. It really is, because that one of our biggest things was certain applications just not working well in that streaming environment when we was using the Zen app. So that's kind of why we had to end up rolling out multiple operating system images for our users prior to Unidesk. The performance it was just slow. Performance externally, like I said, we was using the Cisco ASAs. The Cisco ASAs, they have their place, but it wasn't for our VDI infrastructure. When we moved over to the NetScalers, it's optimized for the HDX protocol, and you can sit at the house sometimes. It feels like if you got a good connection at home, it feels like you're sitting at work. That's the experience you take home with you. It feels like you're still sitting at work. Our storage requirements, that's been huge. Something awesome about Unidesk is every part of Unidesk is thin provision. So you don't have to allocate all your space up front for everything. And the way it was before with us is the Dell EqualLogic Blade that we had, it's 4 terabytes of usable space. We maxed that out after creating about 5 gold image OSs and about 225 desktops. So immediately we had a need for, do we buy more space, or do we find something that's going to help us, get, to get the most out of our investment, what we already have. So our cost of going with Unidesk versus going with another EqualLogic was, was a little bit more, but the savings on the end game is what we're looking at. It just saves a lot more time for us, and with us expanding to our next class, we still don't have to expand our EqualLogic. What we currently have is still going to support them. And that goes back to that concurrent question that was asked. The Dell EqualLogic is rated, I believe, for 500 users is what it's rated at for concurrent usage on it. Let's see. So our storage requirements, they were cut in half when we went to Unidesk. And we can show you some graphs and some information inside of Unidesk. Unidesk console has some great information about what it would require to have this without Unidesk and what you're saving with going with Unidesk when it comes to space. And then we've already talked about our end user experience. We had complaints, and we just had to fix it. So that's why we went with the NetScaler and Unidesk. So for those of you who don't know, if you're on the call and you're not sure what Unidesk even is or what it can do for you, these are some more detailed graphs here. Desktop provisioning, that just comes down, rolling out updates or updating certain software packages. The application layering, which is where Unidesk, no one can beat Unidesk when it comes to that. That's what they're known for. The image management, there's nothing else to say there. If you have a reason to have more than one image, then I feel like you're doing it the wrong way. The persistent personalization, Unidesk carves out those personalizations. So say if you roll out a desktop to someone and they start making changes to that desktop, well, these layers are all stacked on top of each other and they're read-only, so the differences that they make on their desktop are saved off in its own special personalization layer. I think the next slide will show you kind of how that's broken up. And storage optimization, and then patch repair and audit and restore. There's a ton of features built into Unidesk when it comes to upgrading it and just being able to see what all's going on. The log files are awesome whenever you're actually, say you apply an image or apply an application to a desktop, you can just sit there and watch every single step it's doing, and it'll tell you exactly what it's doing. So if it gets hung up or if something happens, you know easily how to get in touch with support. The support team is tremendous there as well. They'll help you out in any way they can. And Unidesk, it only, they recently announced support for the Microsoft Hyper-V, so that's something that is out there. Currently, it's just running on VMware vSphere, but there's a lot of options coming up for people, especially users of XenDesktop. And this kind of goes over how the layering works. So you have that one small image in your gold image, and that gold image is usually about I think about 24 gigs is about what it runs. And then your applications, they're all just whatever they may be, Office, Adobe, anything. It could be Firefox. You can virtualize anything you want. So what it does is it actually carves out little VMDKs, and that one little VMDK is attached to that desktop, and it blends it to where the traditional vDisk from XenDesktop, usually the way it works is you have your C drive, and then you have either a K drive or something else. And then that K drive is kind of where your changes are, and that becomes your new C. So it kind of got confusing for our users as well on that, because they're like, what am I doing saving to this K drive? What about my C drive? Because that's what they're used to seeing. So Unidesk actually, when you look at a Unidesk desktop and you look inside of my computer, you see your C drive, and everything is just sitting right on top of each other, and the end user has no idea what's going on in the background to make this happen. And the way it works too is everything that you do, like management-wise, happens right inside of Unidesk. It has all the connections to your vSphere environment for your hypervisor. It also has connections into your XenDesktop environment. So when you make that desktop in Unidesk, it actually takes care of all that for you. You don't hardly ever have to go into XenDesktop, the Citrix Studio, for any reason to do anything. All that's managed right out of Unidesk. Unidesk can see the status of those desktops, so you don't have to go across multiple panes to manage this application.
So Jonathan, one question we get a lot is how does Unidesk work well with the hybrid storage arrays like the Dell EqualLogic? And I think on that slide you just had up, it shows that the Windows OS layers and the application layers are stored once as read-only VMDKs, virtual disks on vSphere, VHDs, of course, on Microsoft Hyper-V. And they're shared by many VMs. It sounds like you said you had about 100 desktops per blade with Dell. So that means you'll have one instance of Windows, the Windows OS layer, and one instance of all your application layers for every 100 desktops. So the reason why you get great I/O performance on that small storage footprint, because you have 100 desktops sharing those same layers, those same virtual disks, is that because they're being hit by 100 virtual desktops, they stay hot, and Dell EqualLogic knows to put those in its solid state cache, and therefore most of your I/O is being served out of the flash, not the spinning disk. So that's why you get great I/O. Correct.
So yeah, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that. So just a couple of examples of applications. If anybody on the call is from education, those are a couple of the applications that we have virtualized successfully. And then business applications for those of you outside of the academia world. And then here goes another. This is the graph I was talking about. Kind of shows you. So you have the Windows. This is your OS layer. So this is a read-only layer, and then all of your applications are read-only as well. So the only thing that changes is if you make customizations to applications, or if you add files to your desktop, or if you save anything to that desktop, that right there is what saves that information. It throws it out here in this layer. So these right here are all in common with all desktops across the host.
And Jonathan, to clarify, I think you said before that you've got a larger personalization layer that you've set for faculty and staff and students. I think you said it was a 20 gig is the quota that you gave to the personalization layer for faculty and staff? For
the faculty and staff, that's correct.
Yeah, and it was only 5 gig for the students? For the students,
that's right.
Cool. Yeah. So that personalization layer can be set by you guys, and you can set it to whatever you want. And I think as you mentioned, Jonathan, it's thin provision, so it's not going to use up all that space unless you actually use it.
Right. We had a handful of faculty when we had the 10 gig partition before Unidesk. We had it was more than a handful. Probably 20 users that hit that cap. So that was the good thing about Unidesk is it's thin provision, so we can just go ahead and say we're going to give 20 to everybody, and we may have some that don't even use 5, but we may have some that actually uses that space. So we haven't seen a big change in space utilization on that because it is thin provision.
Okay, Dave asks a question: how do the applications interact with each other? For example, does Internet Explorer know that Office 2013 is installed? You want me to take that one? I can probably answer that one.
Yeah, you can go ahead. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, so the answer is that's what Unidesk does well. That's our secret sauce. That's our magic. It's our ability to take these layers that are separate and stored as separate virtual disks and merge them together into this unified C-colon hard drive that Jonathan mentioned. And so we know how to take all the registry keys and files and merge them together. So to the desktop, it looks like each of these applications was natively installed. So it looks like Office 2013 was installed, and then it looks like IE was installed, and they all interact just fine as if they were locally installed. And that's one of the things that Unidesk is pretty unique at. Other layering technologies that are just coming out require you to put apps in the same layer if they want to communicate, and have a lot of restrictions around that. And I think, as Jonathan's going to show in the demo in a few minutes, all of your applications are independently layered in their own separate layers, right, Jonathan?
That's correct.
And that's typical of most of our customers. They just layer an app, and then they assign the layers to any desktop in any combination, any order. And it doesn't matter, and you don't have to think about, gee, what might work with something else, and do I have to group them? There's none of that. We make it really simple, and we've got a lot of technology we've put into making that simple. So that's exactly what we do.
And one other thing to add to that, Tom, is it's great too if you do make a new application and say you have another piece of software that is a prerequisite for that, like during the actual creation of the application you're starting with, or the one you're currently using, you can select one that's already been layered, so that if you go to install that software, it knows that you also need to have this other layer, so it'll automatically grab that when you're going to select it for someone.
Yep, and actually that's probably a good segue. You're actually going to show us that live. And in fact, so Srinivas just asked a question: can you please talk about your processes for testing and rolling out OS updates and application updates? And I think you're actually going to show us a live demo of that, right?
Yeah, we're going to show a demo of actually rolling out an application. We won't be doing one based on updates, but we can talk about that. And I'll kind of talk about that when we get into the application. That way you can see. I think it'd be better to see it from the console and talk about that. So, with that being said, this is time for the live demo. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Branton and let him go through a demo. And what we're going to do is we're going to show the creation of, we're just going to take a simple application right now. We're going to go with Citrix Studio and roll that out to my desktop and also Jeff's. So if you hang on one moment for us, we'll get that going. Okay. So this is kind of, let's just say user calls and they say, hey, I need Citrix Studio installed on my desktop. Can you come do that for me? We say, yeah, give us just a moment. So we'll pull up our Layers tab. And we'll kind of go back and go through the tabs, if you like, after we finish this demo. So this is just a demo on creating an application and rolling it out. So those are the applications that we currently have. So right now we're just going to create a new layer. And we always do our versioning by the date so that we'll actually know when we did something to it last. And same goes if you roll out changes to your applications, you can still version those. So it's just an easy way of knowing if something were to come up when the last time you did a change to it is. And right here, by default, the layer size is 10 gigs, but like I said, that's thin provision, so we just leave that as 10 gigs because it's not going to take it anyway. And this right here is where you select your gold image. So at this point, we're going to say that we want to create this for a Windows 7 installation. And then to actually install the application, we have to select a virtual machine that's in our infrastructure. And this one is actually designated for creating the applications. So what we're going to do here, we're going to load that gold image, and then we're going to go in and make the changes with adding this Citrix Studio. And this right here is where if you needed to add prerequisites, you could go through here and check them off. So for example, if for some reason we needed Google Chrome as part of this, we could go ahead and check that. And then what it'll do when it loads up this layer for us creating it, it's going to load that app layer as well so that it can be on there as part of that prerequisite. So we don't have a prerequisite here, so we're just going to go to the next. And this is the fun part of it, where you get to go out and find all your cool icons. We don't have a cool icon yet for this one, so we'll just go on next here. You can come back and change that later. All right, so this kind of gives you an overview of what you're about to do. You can see there all the specs, and you create the layer. And Jeff, if you click on the task there so they can see it. So right here is a couple things running. One of those is the system ran process, but Jeff can click on that little eye there, and you can actually watch every step of this process. So right now it's actually mounting these VMDKs so that we can log into that installation machine that's in our VMware environment, and we're going to install that application once it's up. So we'll go ahead and pull up vSphere. And also, you can, like I say, you can see everything it's doing here, but you can also in VMware see any changes being made, and based on whatever the service account is you're using, you can see down there that all these tasks were initiated by Unidesk. You see down there? Yeah. So that's a way for us to know that these are coming from our Unidesk environment. And just to give a, since we're here, these are all of our Unidesk virtual appliances. Everything is virtual appliances. You don't have a Windows box running anything. Very, very easy to roll out. And we can kind of talk about what each of those do if people have questions later. So now this is a mounted version of that gold image Windows 7 that we selected on that installation machine. So now we're going to actually go in and just install that application, the Citrix Studio. So kind of what's going to happen here is after you finish doing the installation, what Unidesk does is it goes and it finds all the changes that have taken place, and it takes the difference. So after we install Citrix Studio, it's going to take away the gold image part of that. So it's going to capture just the changes you've made and create that inside of that software layer. So that's the beauty of this, is it's not saving anything except what we're doing in this session right now. And this machine's not on the network, so we have to go through a couple of things since we're going out to our file share. You can also mount a CD here or a DVD if you had one off of.
Steve is asking, he must be watching this very carefully. He said, why did you change the IP address? Is that just to get to the machine?
The reason for that is we have it, the IP address on that is the IP address on it conflicted with something else on our test side, so we had to go in and change it for this demo. That's something we have to go change manually later. That's not part of the normal process. You shouldn't have to change that. I'm glad you mentioned that, though, because that's something you won't have to worry about. So you see here, Jeff just went out and browsed out to this information. He's just going to run the executable just like he would if it was on a regular desktop.
And Jonathan, are you guys doing all this from virtual desktops?
We're currently on a laptop because the room that we're in doesn't have one set up here.
Oh, okay.
So you don't have to change anything. You just, if you are used to installing your applications on the C drive, that's just the way you leave it. And so there's about 2 minutes here. So as this is running, I mean, if there's other questions about anything while that's going, we can answer those.
Yeah. So Srinivas was asking about the process for rolling out OS updates, and I think you talked about how you version them, you use certain labels. One question we get a lot is how do I undo bad patches and updates? Because you can't always test every possible thing. And we heard from a customer just the other day where they took down 200 desktops because a new version of Windows, I guess, came with a new version of IE also, and it broke a bunch of their web apps. And so they were able to undo that just by going back to a previous version of their layer, the OS layer. They just undid it and rebuilt the desktops, and they were all back up and fine again. Have you had that or encountered that kind of an issue at all with either apps or Windows itself?
We haven't run into an issue. We haven't run into an issue with that, but I mean, we understand. We have tested that scenario. Like, say, the way Unidesk is, it has a built-in backup utility. So you just designate some data stores on your storage for those backups. So just for testing purposes, we'll just go into a desktop, make changes, and revert back to those. Just because we haven't dealt with a major issue yet. Knock on wood.
Yeah, you just fixed yourself.
Yeah, I know. Please don't ask that question again.
And Brian just asked, how much RAM and vCPU are you allocating to each VM?
We have two virtual CPUs and 2 gigs for faculty and staff, and the same for the students. In IT, we do have like some of that, like the Visual Studio. It's a pretty beefy piece of software, so we do have 4 virtual CPUs in those. But I think John, is that still 2 gigs in that one? So John said that is still 2 gigs running on his machine. So it finished? Yeah. All right, so that all finished. Let's do it this way. Go back to the Unidesk console, and let's do the finalize part. So after you finish making those changes, you can go right back into here into Unidesk, and if you select the layer that you're actually editing, you click Finalize, and then if you go back into vSphere, you can actually watch it, but it's going to shut down that machine, soft shutdown, and it's going to start writing those changes back to the master cache point in Unidesk. So we'll talk about this a little bit just in case people have questions. But looking here on the left at the OM Unidesk, that's all of our Unidesk infrastructure. So the MCP01 there at the very bottom, that's the master cache point. So that's kind of like, I'm going to save all of my applications here. I'm going to save all of my gold images here. But the actual users aren't using this one. This is just kind of like your master catalog of applications and gold images. The actual users are reading that data off of the CP01 through 05. So say if a user cache point, someone's virtual desktop is stored on CP03. And what we just did by creating this new application, CP03 doesn't actually have that app layer installed on it yet. So what would happen here is whenever you actually go to apply this to a user, it's going to copy that out there to that CP03. So it's not going to actually put it on all the cache points because not all those users need that app. So we can actually show you that in the logs on Unidesk. So Jeff, if you would go ahead and apply that to like mine on your desktop. Okay. And go back down. And then you can see there under tasks that it actually completed that. So it's been finalized. So now what we're going to do is actually go out and apply that application layer to mine and Jeff's desktop. Very simple here. You can select multiple desktops at a time, just holding down Control. This all runs off of Microsoft Silverlight. It's very, very smooth running system. So we're just going to, there's a lot of details here, but when it comes down to just applying an application, you can just click on the left on application assignment or just arrow down through each of the tabs. On the far right, you can actually see all the applications already applied to this desktop. So now all Jeff's going to do is just go down and select that application. And then you can change anything at this time, but this is all we're going to be changing. And this is the options for doing the install. Since this is the demo, we're just going to go ahead and do a force reboot on his machine and my machine so that it'll go ahead and install that.
Just looking at Jeff's stack of layers, he's got a pretty healthy stack of layers on the right side there, huh?
He does. Well, then we go into tasks, you can actually see. Let's go back to the one that shows all of it so you can see multiple ones. So say if you rolled it out to like 100 desktops, if you go in and click on your eye icon, you can actually see each one of those processes running. So you're going to see both of ours here, and it'll let you know exactly what's going on right now.
And I just realized Brian asked a different question also. He asked about your Dell Wise clients. Are they all dual 22-inch monitors?
They are, except in our library. That's the only place. We have just a single 22-inch in there just because of limitations on space. So now we've taken the time to just install that application one time. We don't have to go around and install it 5 different times for 5 different people. It's as easy as just assigning it to someone now.
And there you can see it doing everything in vSphere.
Right. And just if you want to get an idea about what a desktop looks like, just go in like to the properties of one of the machines. You can actually see every one of those VMDKs out there just stacked. Not here, but back on the, like go down to our VDI. Oops. Yeah. Just grab one of those and look at the properties on it. What's the settings? So you can see here that person has a lot of hard disk, but she didn't see that many disks inside of her system. She only sees that C drive. So all these with that layering technology is just all blended into one beautiful C drive. And then you can see the location like Jeff up there on the top right, the disk file. You can actually see what that layer is by seeing it there. Tell you what, while that's running, let's go show them the usage, like the disk usage.
Storage.
Well, not on the storage, but just on inside of Unidesk.
On the
yeah,
report.
Right.
Excuse me.
So this right here is just a report that's built into Unidesk that gives you an idea about how much savings you're getting in storage. So it gives you before requirements if you were not using Unidesk versus you are using Unidesk. So you can see that we're right at 3 terabytes of usage for everything that we're doing. And if we had to break this out and actually do this without Unidesk, without that thin provisioning, we would be needing a lot more disk space than we're currently using. And you can see down below, it lets you know how many copies of each one you have. That's why your totals are different. We'll leave that there a moment just to get an idea. And Unidesk suggests that you don't go over, I believe, like 75 to 100 users per cache point. So that's why you see 5 cache points with 410 desktops. And creating a new cache point is very easy. You just go in, create cache point, and you fill in all the information, and it rolls it out for you.
Yeah, the density of desktops really depends on your data store and also storage. We've got some customers that are really pushing that. They're up around 170 desktops per host per cache point, but they're using Fusion IO cards, so it's all all flash in the server. That's allowing them to scale up like that. But yeah, it's around 100 desktops is more what we see typically.
We'll go back and see where our desktops are. So it looks like mine just completed, and Jess is still running. And that could have just been Jeff's desktop could have been on a different cache point than mine, and it could have took longer to, if there was more usage on that at the time.
So Jonathan, were you planning to show your desktop running
Yeah.
Citrix Studio?
Yeah, we'll show it. Yeah, we'll show it. Just close that off.
And was Jonathan Smith able to come back from his meeting to talk about Visual Studio, or is he caught up still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, cool.
It may not. Let's see. Jess is almost done now.
So the audience had a good run of questions, but it's been a little quiet. My guess is they might be on Amazon.com doing some last-minute shopping.
Okay. Just restart later on that for now. Okay, so after applying that, I should be able to go and see now that I have Citrix Studio installed. That's because I have a problem with my OneDrive. But you see here, the change has been made. So the only thing wrote to my desktop after that new applied app has just been the Citrix Studio. And that error that popped up with SkyDrive is something I was dealing with earlier, so that wasn't part of the actual application being installed. That would be an example of where I would want to go back to a previous backup. So you can see that all these other applications running are antivirus. It's on its app layer. Link is part of the Office 13 app layer. So there goes Citrix Studio. And this is what it looks like on the Unidesk side for Citrix. And this is Citrix Zen Desktop 7.5 is what we're running. So whenever Unidesk creates its desktops, this is where it throws them, out here in these delivery groups. So this is how the user is able to pull it up on their receiver side.
Very cool. All done live with no tricks or magic, all real.
And now Jess is done, so.
Well, terrific. That's a great demo, Jonathan.
I think that was it. We'll go back here and make sure, but yeah. So.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. Did Jonathan want to talk at all about Visual Studio as the last thing?
That's fine. Yeah, he said he'll still talk about that real quick.
Okay.
Can we talk about it now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the biggest advantage that I see about using Visual Studio through Unidesk is it actually outperforms my desktop. I currently have a Dell T3500 with 8 gigs of RAM and like a 300 gig hard drive, and you would think that would normally be enough, but whenever I run Visual Studio locally, I know whenever I use the same project solutions and try to run through different operations in Visual Studio that there's a bit of lag time. So I actually don't use it very often locally on my computer, but I always just default to my my VDI to use it, and it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be doing web applications or Windows 8 applications on the desktop. Running through the debugger, everything runs smoothly. There's no hiccups. It really does outperform my Dell T3500, and that's really been the biggest thing to kind of help me benchmark it, is that the performance on it is just great. When we look at the stats for what resources are allocated to my VDI, it doesn't look as impressive as a T3500, but it just outperforms no matter what. And even beyond Visual Studio, the other applications that we run, our ERP systems for our different departments here at the college, they run just as smooth as well. So really anything that I need to do, I'll try to run through my VDI and just use my desktop as a means to get there.
Great. Now, Jonathan, did you layer Visual Studio yourself? Did you package that one?
I did.
Okay.
And I wasn't involved with Jonathan and Jeff on the implementation so much. I kind of peeked in every now and then when I had time, but so I'm not Unidesk certified or anything like that. But the wizard is easy enough to understand. It's well explained every step about what you're trying to configure, so you kind of take that fear out of you about I'm really about to jack this up bad. So I was able to do Visual Studio on my own. Jonathan overlooked my shoulder just to make sure, but I didn't have to go to him with any questions. He was just letting me know, yep, you're just doing it just like it should be, and it was just super simple.
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, that's one thing you mentioned to me, Jonathan Hadaway. You had said that really anybody can kind of fill in and manage the VDI environment now with Zen Desktop and Unidesk, because it is so simple.
That is correct. Very user-friendly.
All right, well, awesome. So we're a little past the top of the hour. I don't think we have any more questions at this point. So unless you guys have any more final thoughts, we can tie it up now.
If you have any questions that come up after this webinar, you feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me right there on my email on this next step slide, and we'll be happy to give you our thoughts and more of our experience if you have more detailed questions. Yeah.
So thank you for offering to share your information, and hopefully you won't get besieged too much. But we really appreciate Jonathan, you and Jonathan and Jeff for spending time with us today and and sharing your VDI journey. And again, as you can see here, there's links to learn more about Unidesk, Dell, and Citrix. And everything you just saw in the demo is available on our website. Full trial with no limitations at all are available for both vSphere and Hyper-V. So we encourage you to give us a try in your own environment. So guys, thanks again for taking the time today.